about 96, 97, we're in there, you moved west to Minnesota.
Yes.
And St. Paul specifically.
Yes.
And William Mitchell College of Law. You want to talk a little bit about that phase of your career?
Well, it was a lot of things coming together at that time. I think I had kind of a watershed decision to make, because I could have stayed at the school, Mass School of Law, and taught, and a lot of the people I taught with did, but I kind of faced the point where, as a law librarian, if I intended to stay in law librarianship, people told me, well, if you don't get a law library position in an accredited law library now, you never will. And I was, you know, I had kids to look after and everything.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, because if you stay at this unaccredited library for several years after you failed accreditation, you will be an outcast and no library will hire you. But right now you have a period of time in which potentially you would get a job somewhere else if you ever want to.
As sad as that is, it's real.
It was probably real.
Yeah.
You know, I think the person, you know, the person who told me that, I think it was good advice at the time. And someone said to me, well, I wouldn't hire you as a director, even though you've been a director, because you haven't been in an ABA accredited school. But if you were an associate director, maybe I would consider you. This was a helpful dean who gave me advice at a conference or something I went to. And I faced that and thought, well, I think that's sound career advice. And I love law librarianship. I really like being a law library director. I really like managing. I don't want to be... I felt like I kind of faced a situation where I had to be content. I liked the people I worked with. I liked a lot of what they did. Yeah. But to say, well, I'm in my 30s, but I'm just going to stay exactly here and never be able to get a job forever.
Yeah, and there are no guarantees. Here will continue to be here.
Exactly. Here,
yeah.
you know, I like the people, but I felt as the breadwinner, you know, like, you know, my husband and I both had positions, but I was, you know, a primary breadwinner and with kids, and 2 kids by then. Yeah. And so I went on with the career in law librarianship. I haven't regretted that. I love it.
William Mitchell, you did go in as associate director.
I did.
For public services.
I did, associate director and head of public services, and I learned a lot there. I worked with Ann Bateson, who was a director there. She's now at University of St. Thomas. It's a newer school on it. But Hamline, Mitchell Hamline it's called now, but William Mitchell was a wonderful library. They had a great new building, well thought out facility. The people who worked there were really good at everything they did. It was really well run. So it was a great place to go in and say, well, I have management experience, kind of managing public services and managing some administrative things. But now I get to work under someone who's really experienced in running, you know, ABA accreditations, and here's how you use ABA statistics, here's how you benchmark yourself and compare yourself to other schools, and here's how you run a really good law library. So I learned a lot working there.
Now in these early law library positions, I figure you must have had somebody, maybe of course Don, your first way back, as a possible mentor. Do you consider any of the other colleagues you interacted with to have been in that type of a role?
I would consider Ann Bateson,
okay.
who's still in Minneapolis, St. Paul, to be in that role. Darcy has helped me tremendously over the years, Darcy Kirk. Nancy Johnson in Florida was always there. And as I became more active in LL&E and AALL, I tried to get to know other people. You know, of course I didn't know some of the others as well, but I will say that over the years, law librarians are helpful people. They want to, you know, like if you ask a good question, they want to help you get a good answer. And people have been generous with me.
Yeah, I have heard that time and again in these interviews, and that was my own experience. We were very good to each other.
Yes.
In the right sense.
Yes, they were. Yeah. They were. That like, you know, quality answers, honest answers. Yeah. Here's my experience in like this is my source. In other words, it could be, sources could be why this is a good item to have in a collection. Here's a way to put a collection together. Here's a way to manage a collection. Career advice, you know, here's what I've seen happen in other places. You know, they were lawyers, a lot of them, not everybody had, but most of the people I worked with had both a law degree, so they were good lawyers as well as good librarians and administrators. Yeah. And I, you know, look back on it and how grateful I am to all of the people who helped me succeed. Yeah. Because they're all, I've named a few, but there were others, many others along the way who also.
When you start naming.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking.
I forgot. Oh, this is bad.
Yeah, it is. You know, it is, and I mean, I could go on for a long time if I named other mentors or people who helped me out. But those people that I directly worked for in the early years, those are the people who helped me out. And as I said earlier, Judy Geyer was wonderful.
Well, you were not forever going to be an associate director. So in 1998, and for the next few years until about 2001, you moved even farther from Maine or even Boston out to the Bay Area, California, San Francisco, and became the associate dean for the law library and associate professor at Golden Gate University. Where you had, in addition to your library responsibilities, a little teaching you did as well.
Yes.
You want to talk about your days in Golden Gate?
It was, yes, another wonderful job, another wonderful experience. And I think I was very fortunate in how my career grew. Even though I started out as a law library director before I had been a proper librarian in many ways, other than doing cataloging, I went from a small standalone law school to a larger, more established standalone law school at William Mitchell, regionally, you know, very well thought of, and good lawyers again, that they produced so many. And we had the Warren Berger Library because Berger had gone to that law school in it. So it was a larger but established standalone. And my next thing, when I was very, very fortunate, San Francisco, who could, you know, I mean, if you're not going to live in Boston or whatever, it's a city, everyone wants to be in San Francisco. It's a wonderful place to live. And a school had considered me, even though I was relatively inexperienced, because they were smaller, they weren't like the Ivy of the area, but they respected good lawyering and knew some of the people I'd worked with and everything. But that school was affiliated with the university. It was a large part of the university. It wasn't like a tiny little law school and a giant university.
That's right. As I recall, the university was basically the business school and the law school.
Yes, and it had been one of the Y schools, the YMCA schools, that had started up around the early 19, and which again, if you look at kind of the themes of what has mattered to me or what has mattered to people I've worked with, that kind of giving a chance to people who came from modest means. They did not come from money backgrounds. They worked their way through the world. They came up themselves. And that was kind of the Massachusetts School of Law was, this should be open to everyone. Law is a wonderful profession, open to everybody. And then I went out there, and they were a Y school. You know, they had been a Y school. They trained advocates, they trained practitioners, local people on it. But again, it was a bigger stage in the sense that now it wasn't just a standalone law school where I had to work within it. I had to learn to work with the university library and university board of trustees and university administrators, as well as the law school dean and administrators. So it was a more complex environment for me, a great group of people, but I learned a lot because, and
it was a lot more like the real world for most of us than academic, because you had a much broader based institution around you that you were part of.
I did, and you know, it was city, it was urban, and I had before, having worked in standalone law schools, which have their own strengths and weaknesses, but it was a different environment that I learned to operate in, and you know, good deans, and I had a good staff there too. I was a good time period.
Well, you also taught the Property One course from the notes I saw.
That was,
you were branching out in
yes,
that too.
Well, it's kind of a trial by fire. That's
I'll bet. Well, that's how it always starts.
Right. It was, yeah, it was quite. Oh, it was a different thing than teaching. Advanced legal research, you have relatively small classes, and you have, well, I had taught first year research and writing too at Mass School of Law, so I had experience working with the 1Ls, and we had an active teaching program out there, but the other librarians, Mike Daw, who's now the director there, and was on the staff at the time, and they were great teachers, so they helped me learn to teach advanced legal research and that way. But Property 1, it came open one year, and it was like, you know, one of the other professors talked me into it and said, okay, I'll give it a try, because I had liked property in law school. But I have a lot more sympathy, or a lot more empathy, whatever, for first-year professors and what they do in front of that group after going from a class of around 20 people to a class of 70 or 80 people, and in this big room. It was challenging, and I have a lot of respect for the people who do that, because it's very different, very different. And I like the advanced legal research, not just because it's about legal research, but I do like the 25 person group, that when you get to really know the students and know what they're interested in doing and stuff, and then it's an easier setting, and I like it.
Well, you must have also liked your setting in some ways at the Massachusetts school, because now you did leave the Bay Area, and this time you moved to Southern Florida, Florida International.
Yes.
Which was also a really new school.
It was a start. That was a total startup. You totally
up for ABA accreditation.
Yes.
Of course, you had a very interesting and accomplished dean,
Larry
Strickland.
Very much.
You may recall the trick he pulled in a way. I mean, it's a legitimate trick, but the device he used to sort of help get everyone ready for the inspection, the real one, which you did. You did get the accreditation?
We did it at the, as he told me our goal was, and he accomplished, and we accomplished our goal, which is to gain ABA accreditation at the earliest possible moment possible under the ABA. So, and that's what we did.
Well, do you remember, of course, that he put together a sort of I was going to call it a rump inspection.
Mock trial.
Inspection.
Yeah.
And there's some people he'd run across over the years. I think Blair Kaufman was a library consultant.
Blair was who you're going to interview, was our library consultant, and he was wonderful. He had Len's first deanship in Indiana, I think?
No,
Northern Illinois.
And I was the library inspector when they came. They were up for, reaccreditation,
and he hired Blair.
Yeah.
For his first, and he rightfully said, he's, at the time I'm like, well, I've been in libraries, but Blair, every time you talk to Blair, and when he came down to visit, and he's easy to talk to, he talked to everybody, but he would come up with these ideas, and you'd think, why didn't I think of that? Oh, he's right. That's a great idea.
Blair has a reputation, long established, being very innovative and not always thinking within the box. I think the term is outside the box.
He thought both inside and outside the box.
He did, yeah.
He didn't suggest anything that was so far out that it would endanger your accreditation, but he would be able to turn a new lens. It's like, you go to the eye doctor and they turn, is this better or this? And he would turn a different aspect of it. And, thinking of someone I didn't mention, he was very instrumental in our thing there. And again, it was an even larger university than the one I'd been at before. It was a state university. I'd worked in private institutions before. It was my first time in a state university, one of the 11 state Florida universities. And very interesting because of the support from the community, because the people in South Florida really support FIU. It's their university, and the big thing that the year I came,
the big state schools are way up north.
They were all up north,
except that school.
Except that one.
Yeah.
And for years, they had wanted to have a law school, and there had always been kind of this, different of the other Florida state universities, kind of saying, no, we should have the other next law school.
You had locally some private schools. Like
University of
St. Thomas
Miami.
and University of Miami.
St. Thomas University was there, and University of Miami was there. They had those they had their own alumni and people on it.
And they were probably busy making sure they didn't have any new competition.
No one likes a new law school coming into the
Especially one with
territory.
state money.
No, especially the state, because you're like, oh, it's going to be subsidized by the state. It's going to be funded somewhat by the state. But the thing that was interesting in South Florida is that, as I say, the people who live there, that's their school, and they're very proud of Florida International, and they're very proud of the fact, well, this is something I had never assumed to be, but I always lived in northern states, grew up, in northern states. And
I moved to California.
Well, yes, but
at least it was Northern California.
It was Northern California,
yes.
right? It was still kind of Northern California.
Yes.
And when I went to Florida, the first couple of weeks I was there, I kept thinking, why do I keep getting lost with the campus map? I don't understand it. And then I figured out that the cultural assumptions you make, I'd always been in places where the north of the map was at the top of the map. And Florida International, because, over 60% of the population were native Spanish speaking, it was very much a Latino environment. It was not, I was a minority for the first time in this, which was a wonderful experience for me to be in. But they had, the map of the campus had south at the top. And it was a statement, like this is whole world, the whole continent, whole business empire, everything down here.
And I thought maybe you were going to say that the compass is down there, you use the south pointing needle.
No, not quite that one. It was a statement because of the place we were in, and I was like, oh, and I'm making that cultural assumption that, north, that the maps face north, but not all maps need to face north.
Well, no, any direction you want.
It could be any direction. And so that was like, okay, reorient yourself to this new place and this new culture and this new business enterprise and everything. So it was a great experience, but as you said, Len Stickman was an ideal person to choose to lead a new law school because he'd been dean at 2 other schools, and Len, if you know him, is the friendliest person alive.
Actually, I do. I had that pleasure. And I was the librarian on that Rumpf inspection.
Ah!
Yeah. And it was wonderful. I've done a number of other inspections over the years, and you don't get paid for inspections. It's service.
Yeah.
You have to write a fairly massive report,
yes,
which is service even more. Yeah. That one, we were compensated as consultants, and there was no report required.
See, he knows what he's doing. He really knows what he's doing.
Boy,
and he took you to great restaurants too, didn't he?
Oh, always does.
Great restaurants. Great restaurants.
This was a real inspection, except that it wasn't real.
It wasn't real. Yeah.
He followed all the protocols.
Yes, and he gave everybody the experience of it. So.
But whatever, something worked because you got.
We did. Accreditation. We got accreditation 2 years later. Provisional at the first inspection, and he did all the right things and brought in all the good professors.
You have to get provisional at the first because you can't have the real thing for 4 or 5 years minimum.
Right.
That's just part of the rules. They want to basically check you out every year and make sure you're still moving in the right directions.
So when so I had a really good run there. At that point, I had, my family was still in New England. My mother was getting on, and different people in my family and everything. And I'd been roaming the United States for several years by that point. The other thing that happened only a month after I got to Florida was 9/11.
Oh, yes.
Len was the one who told me about 9/11. He said, he came in and he started talking, and he said, "You don't know what's happening, do you?" And I said, "No." Because I was just commuting into work, and he told me. And I think that day, although I still had kids in like middle school and elementary at that point in time, but I told people that I ceased being young. That was the day I became like a middle-aged adult. Yeah. I mean, I was middle-aged, but I mentally, the fear and, fear.
The world changed.
The world changed a lot. that day, including for me, rather than being, kind of the more carefree, like, oh, sure, I'll move here, I'll move there. I became much more
We're
feeling.
no longer protected by those wide oceans between us and all the bad
No.
folks that could be out there someplace.
Or whatever, yeah, just really changed my orientation and my family sense. So after a couple years there, I'd been away from home, which is New England, and family members all still lived up here, my sister, my mother, and grandmothers, and everybody.
So here you came
So
in 2003, back to Boston.
Yes, back to Boston again. I did a full circuit of the United States on border states. I was
been
in
here at Northeastern ever since.
Yes, I have.
You want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes. Very fortunate, glad to be back geographically in home again. I realized I am at New Englander at heart. Since I was interested in genealogy, if you look at the genealogy, everybody was from New England, and they stayed in New England, so deep New England roots on that. But so I was glad to be back and close to my family. But again, some of the things that drew me to Northeastern and that I've enjoyed. One, again, this was originally one of those schools started up at the turn of the 20th century, giving people a chance. And, that it was very Boston-based. Like Golden Gate, this school had been for many years a very local kind of commuter-oriented school. And things were changing. Things were starting to go online, people were doing, and this Northeastern University as a whole had the foresight, the president at the time had the foresight to see, things are shifting and we need to make this a wonderful campus. And they turned what had been a commuter campus with parking lots and, people commuting in from greater Boston, went to school here and did, their educations at night. And they turned it into a really nice urban campus at the time. The law school, which had started out in the early 1900s, had been shut down in the late 1950s. At the time, after the huge, all of the soldiers came back after World War II. The GI Bills and all that. It all kind of like fizzled. And at the time, I wasn't here, but I'm told that they felt that, well, the law school environment doesn't look good, and the university had closed down the law school. Then came 1968. The school was reopened at the height of activism as a blend of things that Northeastern was good at, which was co-op and experiential education. That we have a very unusual calendar here at Northeastern, that our students come and they do a traditional first year. They take torts and property and the courses that people take the first year. But after that, the class splits in half, and we're in quarter system. And at any given time, half of our second and third year classes are out doing jobs, and half are here taking classes. It goes year round. So by the time they graduate, the students all have 4 co-ops and 1 year of job experience as part of their.
That's the sort of thing the practicing bar has been crying
That's
for
what they
years.
want. That's what they want, so that was a strength of Northeastern, because Northeastern has a great co-op program up throughout the school in it. But the other thing, because it had started up in 1968, was they were a very public interest, kind of counterculture, activist, advocate school. Very, very progressive, very liberal. A lot of our founding faculty were civil rights attorneys from the South that had done actual work in the South or in the Justice Department. So it was this combination of the strengths of Northeastern here, in Boston in the co-op system, but also we still have a student body. If you ask them, why did you come to Northeastern, besides it's in Boston, which is, to some degree, people want to be involved. It's an attraction, believe me, it's like location. But it has that combination of, the 2 reasons they'll give, they'll say, I came because of the co-op systems and I want that job experience and my real world experience that I get advocating and working, and because of its public interest focus. So, public interest in a narrow sense in the thing, 60s activism and that, but public interest in very broad thing. The students here, I've liked the students everywhere I've worked, but I love the students at Northeastern. They are interesting, they are culturally diverse, they come up with their own ideas about everything and advocate, and working with the students here is like continuing legal education. Teaching advanced legal research and having the students do pathfinders, do research logs and things on their research is my continuing ed, because the things that they are interested in and the jobs that they do and the causes that they're involved in, inevitably I hear it first here and then I start hearing about it on television. You know what I mean? You start hearing about it on the news, you start reading about it, because they're a very interesting group of people. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's been
Yeah.
a nice experience here.
Yes, it has been.
A great capstone to a career.
Yeah.
Not that you might
Well,
move on someplace else.
well,
And have another capstone.
probably will be here. I like the place, I like the city, I like the people, and of course, again, in my careers, we have this public interest advocacy, good lawyering emphasis in the public interest, and people of every background and how we have like our diversity this year is 40 some odd percent in the class. It's very big, and that's the university is very global oriented. A large number of people everywhere. They encourage every students to do study abroad, co-ops abroad if they can. And again, a bigger university. In Florida International University was huge, but I've been able to see Northeastern as it's gone from a regional school essentially to top 30 school, nationally ranked, nationally known on this boom. It's in the growth. So it's been really interesting.
Years ago, when I was active at American, we found a study that had been done by somebody who showed that the 3 most popular areas in which to study law, areas being locations, not subjects.
Yeah.
One of them, of course, was Washington, D.C., which we were very pleased. Another one was San Francisco, the Bay Area. And the third was Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all the schools in each of those places.
Yes, we
benefited from the students self-selecting those places.
Yes, we get great students, great students, some of whom their families have ties here, or they. The other interesting thing about this school is we also have a great many of the lawyers in Alaska are our graduates. Our satellite state is Alaska. Because
I guess there's no law schools up there.
Well, there are no law schools, and in the early days, we had a group of our students get co-ops, decide, I like Alaska, I'm a really independent-minded person, I'm going to strike off, I'm going to live in Alaska. And the alumni have helped the students. There's been a pipeline over the years.
Yeah, I suppose once you get a group of alums there, they basically attract more people from the same place.
Sure, we'll take co-ops, we'll take students or whatever. So we have a large number of our people end up staying in Boston. A lot of people go to New York. We have a lot of people go to California, Washington, but also Alaska, of all places.
Well, I would guess New York.
Yes, New York is.
But Alaska, that's
no one. Yeah, it's a little known fact about here in Northeastern, but it's been interesting because when I came in here in 2003, things were kind of the old law librarianship, the established way of doing things, but thanks to the Great Recession and the downturn in the number of people applying to schools, the recession cutting off people's financial resources to be able to go to school and everything, of course, like the rest of the law schools in the United States, this law school had a great, the great downturn in the number of people applying. And unless even the schools that were huge, like Harvard or whatever, that had endowments and things, everybody took a hit and things had to change in a big way. At the same time, we've been straddling as law librarians the book and the electronic for a long time now, and wanting to be good librarians and have everything and to serve everybody of every media, we have tried to have both as much as possible. But when you come to a point in time when finances are restricted and you have less students and you have less money and you really ask, like with a lot of schools, we had to look again at how we do things. How can we afford to duplicate both? If we have it in electronic, can we really afford to still have it in paper? Do the students want to use it in paper or not? Mass School of Law, when I was there, had tried to do a lot electronically in the early years.
A little bit early in those days.
Well, but they were early. They were ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
The other person, I don't know if, Barty Wolf. Did you know Barty Wolf?
Oh, I know Barty.
Barty from
Barty, he was down at St. Thomas, and before that, Cleveland State.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when I was at Mass School of Law, the dean, Larry Velvel was the dean at Mass School of Law, and I decided we would go down and visit Barty because everyone kept saying, well, if you're really out there, you could look at some of the things he's trying because he's way ahead of the curve.
Well, Barty was in Ohio at Cleveland State when OBAR came along, and from then on he was running with this electronic stuff.
He was, and
really.
We went down there, and he, again, thinking out of the box. I mean, he was ahead of his time because people were like, you know, I don't understand, but he was just doing some of these things before anybody else got around to doing it, creating his own things, you know. So I learned he was another person who was very interesting in saying, well, this is what we've done, you know, and all that. So Mass School of Law had attempted to do that, but in the 1990, 1991, that was kind of ahead of.
So, as you say, they were ahead of the curve.
They were, you know, really ahead of the curve, and for a brand new law school to try to do that, but you know, it's come full circle, and I'm now teaching law practice technology and changes in the legal profession because about 3 or 4 years ago, AALL was held in Boston. It was the year Darcy Kirk was the president of AALL, and she had the foresight, and the program planning committee had the foresight to bring in Richard Susskind as the speaker. And I got up early and went down, even though I hate getting up early and going down. I thought, okay, you know, this is really a different kind of speaker than usual. Well, I'm going to go listen to Richard Susskind. I was 12 or 13, it was on 12 or 13, I guess it was around here. And I came out of that like, the world is changing. It isn't just that the economy is changing and the economies of law schools and everything is changing. The legal world and the world of practice is changing in a huge way, seismic change. And I could just see what he was saying was true. And after that time, it was like, well, for a law library to keep up and modernize, you can't look back. You have to be looking at where the students are going to be going, where the professors are going to be going. And so that was like, I hadn't been back to school in many years, so I had to put myself through my own school of learning, you know, to become fluent in computer services and the new way.
The recession helped to
recession
sort of hurry this process along of transformation.
It did. I think something that may have taken a generation to happen telescoped into just a few years.
Well, that's the way of the world.
Yes.
Well, maybe on that
growth.
basis, we're probably nearing the end of today's conversation, Sarah. Before we do, it's customary to ask if there's anything that has not come up that you would like to raise. And you don't have to have anything, because many people don't.
I guess closing, just to reiterate what we talked about earlier about the generosity of the many people in the profession who, instead of seeing you as, you know, they're a competitive threat, we'll, you know, view this as a corporate entity as a threat. They are just the opposite. They're wonderful librarians, they're wonderful colleagues, sharing their knowledge with me, and to this day, if you don't know what to do and you put the question out on the listservs, people will give you wonderful ideas. Still, that has not changed. So I'd say that ethos about the profession has changed, and I think law library space challenges, and the challenge is partly that because of the name library, people think, oh, Libra's book, and they associate you with books, and they don't necessarily see the expertise that people have and have gained early on in electronic resources, technology, teaching, and that sort of thing. And so I think our challenge as a profession is to maintain the values of the profession in one thing that had been in your script that we didn't talk about was in 2008, I wrote an article that had won the Law Library Journal Article of the Year, and it talked about how do we bring the values of our profession into the modern world? What do we rank? What do we gauge quality by? And that was kind of the heart of the article, but I think that's what the challenge we still face, you know, here we are 8 years later, but how do we take the values of depth, accurate sources, and collegiality and collaboration and helping students learn and change that into the modern era of electronics. So it's still a fascinating profession, and it still never has 2 days that are exactly the same.
That's part of what I always felt made my job so much fun.
Yes, it is. It's like, oh, you never know who will walk in the door and what they'll want.
My relationships with my colleagues around the country, as well as in the library, which I worked
the regional associations.
That was such that it made it well worth it.
Yes, I agree. So and it's good to see you back in the profession again and being able to be professionally active.
Well, I'm having a grand time doing these conversations. So I want to thank you, Sarah, for being part of today's conversation.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the people at Hyde.
And for taking all this time and effort on your part to tell us your story.
Glad to have someone listen.
Will be all the better. I mean, some fascinating information about
I haven't had
schools.
The typical, the exact path that other people have followed. We're starting in one library and growing up through it. I've gone to different places, but it's been a wonderful career in.
And you also caught me at another one of my tricks, which is skipping a few things if I were getting really good information on something that I hadn't anticipated.
No, I happened to think of that. You said, "Do you have anything else?" And you wrote a great script.
That's why I do the anything else, because especially when I do skip over something, or someone has something else that's different, and they want to, they want to talk about.
Yeah, it's just kind of a summary piece. It opens the door for saying, how do we bring our values and our strengths ahead into the future?
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Sarah, for today's efforts on your part to give
Thanks for listening.
This information.
Thank
you.
Okay.